Hello, everyone. So, we are Fundraising. We empower artists, individuals, and communities to connect together to impact the world. Fundraising enables artists and sponsors to join forces, gather supporters, and transfer energy in the form of money to a beneficiary. Together, they create a campaign website, and then anyone can give their support by buying limited edition digital art. For any reason,
Fundraising.
Fundraising.
Raisin.
Excellent. And thank you so much for joining us here on the Arena. We're very excited to be streaming here live every Monday. And thank you so much for your time, Kit, Mari, Zaheen, and very special guest today, George Howard, professor at Berklee College of Music, as well as entrepreneur. We're going to be talking to him about his early founding days of a product that I've used for years as a musician called TuneCore, and then branch into his many advances, including Acme Innovation, and even George Howard Strategic into the Web3 sector. But first and foremost, George, thank you so much for taking the time to meet us here in our Monday marketing meeting. It's really excited to be speaking with you again today.
Well, thanks for having me. And I just wore the middle-aged man filter.
They have a Gandalf one that I'm sure you could figure out, but I prefer your background. There's true art there, just like the true art that we have here with Raisin. So you've had an incredible career in music business and management, as well as you've forefronted music licensing in blockchain. And one of the before any of that was TuneCore. And so in your position in TuneCore, for you, what were some early indicators of success? Some I would say in respect to marketing, what were some early indicators of this is working?
Yeah. First off, thanks for the kind words. It's been a interesting career and satisfying, and particularly, but not done, in the sense of in hindsight, I can see that I've been sort of guided by one overarching principle, which is to try to help artists build and create sustainable careers on their own terms. And I never could have summed that up back when I started a record company when I was 19, or helped Jeff Price start TuneCore when I was 30 or whatever. But it is the through line of my work. And you mentioned Web3, and that's just a continuation in the sense of I see it as another tool that really can help artists. And so that sort of mindset, which I summarize is my philosophy is sort of purpose, not product. But that purpose, I believe, needs to be bigger than yourself, right? Like if your sole purpose is just yourself, you will hit some kind of wall, emotional or otherwise. So it's been helpful. As I said, I wouldn't have been able to define it that way 20 some years ago, but when I think back, it while it was sort of unformed, it was still there. And as that relates to marketing, marketing is one of those disciplines that, while you can get degrees in it, you can get an MBA, you can get PhDs in marketing. Most marketers don't have a whole lot of kind of science behind it. And it's one of those positions that you can just kind of say, I'm a marketer and for good and bad. Right. And so I've tried, I co-founded TuneCore with Jeff before I had an MBA or a law degree into these things. But I went back and got those degrees because I wanted to put that science to the experience. And that's a really good order to do it, by the way. If there are any people who are viewing this or listening to this and they're contemplating an advanced degree, MBA or law degree or something, and this is the professor coming out of me, I highly recommend working before you go do those things, because otherwise it's just continuity between undergrad and graduate, and you don't really benefit from it. But in some ways it validated a lot of what we were thinking, but it also gave kind of terminology, which is helpful. And so the signs and signals that we saw at TuneCore were people kind of telling their friends, right? And we knew that was a good thing. We didn't. I mean, we started the company with $5,000. We didn't have any marketing budget. I was kind of putatively in charge of marketing. I'm not 100% sure why, to be honest. But when there are four people, everybody does everything, right? And and but then going through the kind of education, you realize, well, that's a thing, and that thing, when customers tell their friends, is a really important data point, right? And the kind of term of art for it is net promoter score, and it means exactly what I said. And everybody sees it, right? And that's one of the weird, insidious things. Like anytime you buy something online, frequently when you buy something online, you'll get a follow-up email or text. How likely on a scale of 1 to 10 are you to tell a friend? And that's sort of an anecdotal net promoter score. There's actually some science behind it. But why it's so important is because we're all fighting for people's attention. And TuneCore was 2004, so the internet was there, obviously, or we wouldn't have been able to do it. But MySpace was still the dominant social network. Friendster, MySpace were sort of competing. Facebook was still in the .edu stage until 2007. Twitter came out in 2007. The iPhone came out in 2007. Airbnb came out in 2007, right? So all of those things, it was far less structured then in terms of what we think of, but the philosophy is the same. And so we kind of saw it. And then that led me to building out 3 principles that I use with all marketing. The first is this idea of a mirror of desire, right? And the idea around that is, and this goes to something we've talked about, which is Clay Christensen's job to be done. I stole the mirror of desire thing from Harry Potter. If you remember Harry Potter in the first book, Harry goes up to the attic of Hogwarts and he finds this mirror, and the mirror is the mirror of Erised, Erised. And of course, because J.K. Rowling is very clever, she also has some not great qualities, but if you put a mirror in front of Erised, it says desire. And what Harry saw, of course, were his parents, right, which is what he desired. But the really educational component of what happens is when Ron goes and finds the mirror. And Ron sees himself winning the Quidditch Cup, which is not what he wanted, right? That was a metaphor, because what he wanted as one of a bajillion kids, his best friend is the boy who lived, his other good friend is Hermione, who can split herself in two, and he was just sort of always the red-headed stepchild, right? So the left out one. So winning the Quidditch Cup wasn't what he wanted. He wanted the attention that brought. And something kind of clicked for me there. And another thing triangulated with it, I saw Bruce Springsteen quote where he said, if you're a performer, when you're on stage, you need to look out in the audience and see yourself. And the people in the audience need to look up on the stage and see themselves, or a version of themselves, right? And all of this, again, when you get educational about it, triangulates to something called self-actualization, which is the top of, if you had psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once you satisfy sort of base levels, food and friends, etc., then it's like, well, I need to self-actualize. I want to become the most me, right? And so the mirror of desire, when you look at it as a product, you start going, I now know why Nike says just do it, right? They don't say just buy shoes, right? People don't buy Nike because they're cheaper, because they're not. They don't buy Nike because they're necessarily better, because they're sort of commoditized. They're not any better than Adidas or whatever, but there's some mental shift that Nike has done through its marketing in association with various athletes that make people go, well, I'm just going to do something. They're selling an image, a better image of you after you buy that product. Apple, and Apple's losing it now, but Apple in the Steve Jobs era was selling, you don't buy Apple products because they're cheaper, because they're not, and they're not better, right? You buy them because when you hear that bing or bong or whatever chime, you feel more creative, right? And that's why they give away GarageBand and the photo tools, and their ad campaigns shot on iPhone, but they're shot by customers, right? So you start getting at this underlying job to be done of the product. And with TuneCore, we realized what that was not distribution, because we weren't the first at that by any means, right? There was CD Baby, there was the Orchard, there were a handful of others, right? But what we were selling was, hey, you are a valid musician. Now you're up in the same store as your heroes. We're selling validation. And that's what artists want, right? I teach at Berkeley, and I see these kids. When you sign your first record contract, it's never for the money, right? Your second, your third, man. But that first one is just like, oh man, I want someone to tell me that my work is valid, right? So
Did
when
you feel
look,
that? Oh, so I was just Benny. Did you feel that when you started? How was that for you from a customer
Absolutely.
point of view?
There was the kind of drive to stay as independent as possible. This was also coming up in a time. It was Criminy. What is his name? He's got the rap about going to the thrift store.
it was Macklemore.
Macklemore, thank you. And I had it on the tip of my tongue, but Macklemore was he was one of the first. He was showing that you could still be independent and keep everything yourself. This was at a time when things were starting to get flooded in the industry, and artists were finding it harder and harder to make money. And it was exactly what you're saying, trying to chase that absolutely validation. Or be able to say we are a band, we do create music, we're on exactly the same platforms that our heroes are on.
That's it.
And I love this. It sounds like throughout your career you've had it as a mentality of like academia leading to altruism, just having the education and the mechanics and the science to bring that purpose to life.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that's you nailed my next point, right? So in order to self-actualize, you need the knowledge and the tools to be your own record label. And so our marketing scheme, such as it was me just writing hundreds, thousands of blog posts and PDFs and stuff about the difference between, the sound recording and the composition and the, music, all of this stuff, and just giving it away. There was no, and this was pre-HubSpot and that whole gamble of, hey, give us your email, we'll give you a PDF, which is fine. But this was just pure altruism, right? And that we were running a business, we were capitalists, but it's for me, it's that purpose has to be bigger than yourself, and so that led to the next kind of pillar of my marketing philosophy. Once someone looks into a mirror of desire and is reflected back at them, hey, this feels good, something magic happens. And this relates to Net Promoter Score. So if you've ever like come upon someone who's just gotten into yoga or something, right? They're super evangelical about it because they feel so great, right? And so you'll be at a party with them and be like, my knee hurts. We should do yoga, and it's like, I've got terrible anxiety. What'll work for you? Yoga, right? and it's because it's working for them, right? And God forbid you get trapped in an elevator with an evangelical Christian, right? But like it's that moment or some vegan, right? Like where it's like when someone gets converted into something because they feel better about something, there's an information asymmetry. I know something you don't. And humans hate that. They can't stand that, right? And they need to make it symmetrical. It's music, right? Like our desires to share music. And so the second prong is customer as teacher. You shift the burden from the brand saying, hey, you should check, because we don't believe brands, right? Like that ship has so long ago sailed, right? But we believe our friends. And if our friends say, hey, I use this service called TuneCore and it's kind of great, done, right? And that's Net Promoter Score. And those are the two metrics you look for. Then it shifts back to the company, right? Then the company has to go, we see that some people are feeling self-actualized, and we see that people are telling their friends, and there are lots of ways you can do it. Now, our job in the third prong is architecture of participation. It's your job then as the company to go, we have all these disparate people telling their friends, bring them together. Make them feel part of something bigger than themselves. Make them feel like they're building the thing. I'll never forget. We went out, Jeff and I went out to one of the ASCAP expos. This was a few years after TuneCore started, but we weren't, it was going. And we were supposed to do a little talk, and we were okay, well, you're in room X. And they're like, oh, we got to move. By the end of the time they moved us, we were in like the biggest hall. There were thousands of people there, and they loved TuneCore, which is weird, right? Like, but it had transcended, and they didn't love it because of Jeff and myself, or they loved it because they felt like it was kind of theirs, and that's really important. I've got this isn't an ad, but I've got a new startup myself, which is sort of, I think there are very few places for independent music to sort of be discovered, and certainly it's very hard if you're an independent music fan to kind of promote that out. And part of it came about because I was a fan and still am a user of Bandcamp and others, but it's now gotten so distended. I don't know who runs Bandcamp. It's been sold X number of times. I do know it's now owned by Songtradr, which, keep my opinion to myself, but it's very different than when it was, hey, and so you need that kind of founder ethos and the team to go, these are our values. This is what we do. If they align with yours, come on. If they don't, go find something that does, right? And so anyway, it's those 3 prompts, right? That mirror of desire, get people going. This makes me feel like the best version of myself. Then look to see if they're telling people. If they are, and they will, then create an environment in which you can kind of share the information back and forth. And, underneath that sort of non-scientific thing is Net Promoter Score, is job to be done, is all of these elements that, as I say, once I went kind of back to school, I was able to put this into a structure.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of my learning in business has been like that. I did sales for a while, and then I took this amazing sales course on consultative sales, which was putting a structure to what I'd already sort of been doing, but not quite. Right. And that just allows you to just sort of like really tighten and get
and
good.
You can measure stuff, right? I mean, that's the problem. And like so much of marketing is marketing theater, where it's just sort of, well, it seems like people, it's like, yeah, but you can't survive as a business. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So, the devil's in the details, but like once you've got the sort of structure and the pillars, the philosophy, whatever, then you can do experiments to test it. And I think that's the core. That's what I try to impart to my students. Like, because they're like, well, George, Professor Howard, whatever, how do I get my music heard? But I can tell you what the structures are, and then you be creative within those structures. And that's why it's cool, right? Like that blends the art and the science. And I'm fortunate to teach at Berkeley, where the kids are off the charts creative, but many of them felt, sort of that they couldn't do math, that they couldn't do business or whatever, which is just it's the industrial complex or something. But so I try to disabuse them of that and say, no, it's within those pillars, you all will win because you're more creative, and particularly in the age of AI, right? Because AI is not creative, right? It's good at sort of structure and good at sourcing vast piles of information, but you've got to be creative within that. So anyway, I have a complex relationship with AI, but as a teacher, I'm not threatened by, because I love teaching sort of the meta concepts. I love that now I don't have to try to cajole people to read, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, which they will never do anyway. I could say, use ChatGPT to get the main topics. Now tell me how you would use it for your music. They can't ChatGPT that, right? They can ChatGPT what Crossing the Chasm is. What are they going to say? Hey, ChatGPT, what should I do with my music that you know nothing about?
Right.
Yeah.
And
get quality answers. No, you get
leveraging
hallucination.
You get slop.
Yeah.
Commoditized slop. Yeah.
I love hearing that from a professor, and that's one way that I've heard to utilize as you have to start leveraging AI in every industry. Those that
you make it your assistant.
Yes. Look for not for answers to questions, but for prompts for questions themselves. And then just exactly what you did, giving it to your students, say, hey, this is what I already know, AI can do this. Now you make it better. That's all that, ChatGPT.
Use it as your research assistant. Use it as your intern. Use it as your partner, right? Like, I mean, fortunately for me, I don't have to practice law, but I still get asked to do the occasional contract or whatever, form some LLC for someone, which is a drag. And of course I would do it, but man, I got to use 7 hours of my weekend to do some LLC for some business. It takes me 8 seconds now, but I also have the foundational knowledge to look through and go, yes, correct. right? So it's that meta knowledge, and look again. If you haven't read Kurzweil's new book, the Singularity is Nearer, which just came out, you should. It's very good. And he's, to my mind, the best and maybe the only kind of futurist that you should listen to. But I think by 2027, maybe a little later, there will be some form of AGI where there will be creativity, so to speak, and that's gonna, there'll be a reckoning at that point. For artists, I think that we are, as always, sort of in the fight of our lives, but there's two sides to it. I mean, the 808 drum machine didn't replace drummers. I think it's very different now, particularly for people who are writing film music or music for TV shows and ads and stuff. I think we need to fight very hard for respect of copyright. The current copyright code is sufficient. We just have to enforce it. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. We're talking about marketing, but anyway, to your point, use AI as your assistant, your research assistant. It's pretty good at saying, hey, we are this or that company. Generate some personas, some psychographic details, but then refine it and tune it and then test it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and in respect to fundraising and net promoter score, I didn't know that. I told you I know just about enough about marketing to be dangerous. But when we were telling you the other day, we were like, oh yeah, and they're talking about us and they're referring us to other artists, and you were like, oh, that's what you want.
That's the key metric. Yeah. Like when you shift the burden of promotion from yourself to your customers, you win. Your customer acquisition cost goes down, if not to zero. Your lifetime value goes way up, because when someone feels like they're part of something, you decommoditize and they go, well, I'm going to stick with fundraising rather than some substitute, even if that substitute is quote unquote cheaper or better, because I have a value affinity there. That's how you breed customer loyalty, right? Marketing is two things. Do something remarkable, which is subjective. What's remarkable to you all may not be to me, and then put that in front of people predisposed to care. That's your whole job as a marketer. How do we articulate what we're doing in a way that someone predisposed to care will go, this is remarkable to me, and then find those people. If you do both, and you must do both, you will win. If you do only one, you will not. My 100-year-old grandmother, Miles Davis, could come back from the grave and play trumpet, and she would ask him to be quiet. She's not a jazz fan. Berkeley, you got all these jazz
predisposed.
Yeah, you got all these jazz fans at Berkeley. If I put some mid-level jazz person in front of them, they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm out of here." Right? Like they're not remarkable. You have to do those two things, and then it unlocks. We didn't know this at TuneCore, but we learned, and to Benny's point, we learned that our quote-unquote remarkableness, or if that's a word, was that we were empowering artists through education to be their own label, right? Once we realized that, boom. Now there are, sadly, countless musicians, far more than there should be, who do not want to be their own label, who have still bought into the fake mirror that the major labels put out there, which is the only thing that keeps them getting all this attention that they get from unsigned artists, that, hey, that's real validation. And it's a devil's bargain, because 99.9% of them, that's the end of their career.
Yeah.
So these things, like you mentioned, you were blogging and doing all these things. And Zahina had a question about because we're doing some blogging. All these tools are to this end, right? Yeah. We're trying to create these connections between people. I've thought a lot about where do we form these communities? Is it on Reddit? Like, how do we get these people
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is a sort of a little bugaboo for me. You can't form a community. All you can do is provide organization to
structures for it, right?
And it's a mind shift, right? Because I hear people say that all the time. We're going to build a community. No, you're not, unless you're a fascist. You have to recognize that there are unstructured people out there who like this thing, but don't know that there are others who do. The guy who started eBay did it because his girlfriend or wife or whatever collected Pez dispensers, and she wanted to find and connect with others. So he built eBay to do that for her, right? And what do you know? She found other people with Pez. So it's creating that structure, but you can't form it. I promise you can't. In Marblehead, Massachusetts, where I live, I don't know, 5,000 people here. there are probably 500 people would be like, oh, fundraising, cool. Like they're here, but they're not yet part of your community.
Yeah,
So
it's like we need to
say,
create
hey, be part of this.
to
You need
welcome
to kind of put
them
yourself in front of them in a way that makes them go, oh, I need to be part of that.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Zaheen, you had
Yeah. So, in order to do that, we were thinking that the artists we are connecting, they all have a story for the art they are putting up. So, how relevant, how fruitful it will be to put that story on the blogs, so that when people are seeing that art, it's not just a piece of art. There's a story, there's an idea, there's an inspiration behind it.
No, I love it. So like we all have egos, so we can, my goal in life is to completely get rid of it, but it's hard. But artists have a weird mixture of massive ego and massive insecurity at the same time, right? So, and I've used this tactic a lot over the years. Have the artist tell their stories themselves, but you tell it first, right? Markets are conversations, and drill that into your head. That I stole that from a book called The Clue Trade. Markets are conversations when people are talking about things, right? And so, but we as artists are, as I say, weird shyness and also ego. Like we don't, those artists that aren't complete narcissists don't self-aggrandize. They have a hard time with that, right? But if you can lead them to it, do an interview with them, rather than saying, hey, write us your artist statement or whatever, say, I love what you're doing. I wrote something up and I'm going to post it and I'd love to talk to you further. Then we're humans. Now we've brought it down to a level of actual human interaction, not, hey, tell me your art. Like, no, A, that feels really awkward to me. B, I don't think that way, but if it's like, hey, I wrote this thing and now I want to talk to you, people will do it. And then, and I'm sure you'll do it well, you do it well, those artists will then go, hey, someone wrote about my thing, and they'll send a link out. Flywheel, right?
Yeah.
It's the best marketing you can do. Give without expectations of return. Don't make it transactional.
Well, we are coming down the home stretch. Are there any final thoughts? Shall we, Benny or George?
No, I love what you're doing, and I hope this was somewhat helpful, and I'm happy to.
It was great. And so what's your? Do you want to tell your socials or anything, or
the main thing I love, because we're sort of all bound by art. I'm not interested in all my own socials, but I would love people to check out the new company called Harmonic.fm, just like it sounds, Harmonic.fm, and it's brand new. We're still in sort of a invite thing, but anybody in the fundraising community who wants to invite you, I'll get you in. And it's a way for artists to have their own record store where they can put up their own music, but also the music that they are influenced by, etc. And then more importantly, it's a way for fans who love artist work to have their own record stores. And when people buy the art that they love through their stores, they get the commission and the artists get it, and the platform takes 10%, then it's split 85% to the artist. So it's a referral system, which is awesome. Weirdly lacking in music. Like anytime you're on any online publication that's reviewing blenders or whatever, they all say, hey, if you buy from us, we take a cut. We should structure, I'm just trying to structure Net Promoter Score, right? The fan is profoundly unaccounted for in the sort of economy of music. So trying to change that. And then also you've got all sorts of wonderful institutions out there, whether they're venues or independent radio or whatever, that have no real resource, no way to bring economies and money in. So you build a store. If you're an online radio station, you play a bunch of music, and then you say, well, now you can go to harmonic.fm/radio station. When you buy the records or downloads or whatever that we played on this show, it helps support us to keep doing what we're doing.
Awesome. I like
that's the idea.
I hope so. Excellent. We just shared that out in the chat.
Thank you.
As well. We really appreciate your time. George, thank you so much. It's been it's always a pleasure talking to you. From music to licensing to Harry Potter. You never know where it's going to go.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for having me. And as I say, always happy to help when I recognize people who are doing the right thing. So thank you all for what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
We absolutely
you.
I love that the way you purpose, not product, and I think that fits right into
But the
fundraising.
purpose has got to be bigger than yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
For any reason, fun.
Fundraising.
Fundraising.